I'm really pumped to talk about this because, like Ed Piskor, I grew up being a big fan of comic books, as well as hip-hop music is something that I grew up with along with my older brother. So reading this series was, I guess, kind of inevitable. I'm surprised that I didn't know about it prior to reading X-Men Grand Design, which is actually the first work of Ed Piskor's that I've read, and I loved it. I loved all of X-Men Grand Design. You guys could check out my review of X-Men Grand Design #1. I'll go ahead and link it also in this video in the top right corner, like it always shows up as a suggestion. But if you saw that review, then you kind of know what to expect, I guess, from this here. If you saw that review, if you're not familiar with Ed Piskor's work, this is really where it kind of all started with him, was with Hip Hop Family Tree. His style is really more reminiscent of the really golden age style of comic book writing, the way he frames everything, but the way he does things is he kind of summarizes things, and he really goes ahead and decides to put these key moments that happen throughout the course of something. So, like, for example, with X-Men Grand Design, if you read it, it's like a chronicle for all the key events within the X-Men mythos, and it's all done in order, even the stuff that was retconned many years later. So even the stuff with Professor Xavier, for example, when he fought the Shadow King, that's a story that was really more established later on, like in the 80s. And so he retcons that, though, in a timeline, basically, of when it happened before he formed the X-Men. So everything works in a chronological order. Even the stuff that, again, came out in later years. And it's fantastic. And the way it's done, like I said, like an old-style comic, really reminds you, if you've ever seen The Adventures of Tintin, I would say that's what it reminds me of the most. That is probably the best comparison. If you know those style of comics, those Tintin style of comics, The Adventures of Tintin, then that's kind of like how he does these comics. But he really started it off with Hip Hop Family Tree. And like I said, I'm surprised I didn't know about this series sooner, because I'm a huge hip hop fan, of course. Love the music, still listen to it to this day, especially old school hip hop. So I finally got around to ordering this. This was $30 on Amazon, and it contains the first 2 volumes of Hip Hop Family Tree. And it also has a little extra exclusive bonus. It's like this little Rob Liefeld comic, because that's one of Ed Piskor's inspirations. He's a huge fan of Rob Liefeld, so he did this little mini comic, Rob Liefeld did, that is added to this set. But let's go ahead and take a look at this box. And one thing I want to say right off the bat about this box is that it is much bigger than I anticipated it to be. As you can see in my hands here. Now, I'm going to compare right here. This is another one of Ed Piskor's books. This is WYSIWYG. So you could just see, you could get an idea of how much bigger this is. This is even bigger than Doug TenNapel's Bigfoot Bill. If you've seen how big that book is, it's slightly bigger than that. And this is, well, the box is, but the books inside still are as well. And just to break it down a little bit further, this is a regular sized graphic novel, right? So you can see here how little WYSIWYG is compared to that. So I guess a better way to do it would be like this. You could kind of see the differences in sizes of everything. So I found that to be interesting. And I don't know if that's just something that Fantagraphics does, which that's who produced these books, or I should say published these books. I don't know if that's just something they do with their graphic novels. They just put them bigger. But, man, this is really good stuff. Let's just go ahead and take a look on the inside here. Here are the 2 volumes. Put the box aside just so you can see. But this is book #1. And right there is Grandmaster Flash, one of the most important figures in hip-hop history. And that is Afrika Bambaataa, another very important figure in hip-hop history. So reading through both of these, what you get a lot of in these books, of course, is the roots of hip-hop, starting off with DJ Kool Herc in the 70s, starting off with DJ Kool Herc, moving on into when it really started to kind of catch momentum, which would be around the time, Grandmaster Flash, Afrika Bambaataa, Curtis Blow, guys like that. And it covers all that. And as you can see, if you've read X-Men Grand Design, you'll recognize his style, of course, because this is how he started off with everything. Again, a summary of everything. What I like also, and I think is really funny, you'll go up here real quick just to show you all, is how he kind of portrays some of the people. in this series. He makes them a little bit more of a caricature of what they really are. Like, for example, up here in the right-hand corner, this is Russell Simmons. As you can see how he makes him look. He makes him look kind of goofy and a little bit more of a character. Really emphasizes on the fact that Russell Simmons has a lisp, but he grossly exaggerates it in this. I mean, his lisp isn't this bad, but it's funny how he makes him talk in this. So he kind of makes him a little bit of a caricature of what Russell Simmons is. I don't think that's something that's done personally to insult Russell Simmons. I think he did it just to have a little bit of fun and just to make this book a little bit more enjoyable by adding humorous things like that. And there is a lot of humorous parts in this. The way that he kind of retells the story of some key events that happened throughout the course of hip-hop. You'll see a lot of that in here, a lot of anecdotes and things like that, but it's fun. It all works in a way that is educational. Nothing ever feels stalled. It's a lot, like I said, if you've read X-Men Grand Design, you're already kind of familiar with the way he works these stories. You know, he tells you what you need to know while gradually progressing, and it never feels... I mean, there is, if I have one criticism, I will say this. There is certain points in time where it does feel where he cuts off from one subject to another a little too abruptly, but I think by the time he did X-Men Grand Design, that's something that he mastered. And it doesn't feel that way when you read X-Men Grand Design. None of it feels like it cuts to a halt, boom, and then let's talk about this, and it's jarring. With this, there is a couple parts that are like that, where it's just the transition, I guess you could say, is not as fluid as it is with X-Men Grand Design. So to me, that's just a testament that he's gotten much better, but it's still good. It's still an enjoyable work, and I love it. I mean, I don't know what else I could say. As far as what this covers, this first book covers 1970s to 81, and this one 81 to 83. So really what it's covering is, of course, the early days, Grandmaster Flash coming into prominence, a lot of the people that would come into prominence during that time frame, as well as some other key figures that helped move along hip-hop. Obviously, they talk about the Sugar Hill Gang and Rapper's Delight. They talk about Blondie and her interests, the group Blondie, I should say, and their interest in hip-hop and how they kind of contributed to everything. But it goes from that early stages of hip-hop getting exposure, as well as the culture surrounding hip-hop, artwork, graffiti, and things like that, is talked about in this, and how there was interest in showing not just the music of hip-hop, but the culture of hip-hop, which I thought was great. I mean, you also see the early stages, right? The Beastie Boys right before they're formed, things like that. They talk a lot about Africa Bambaataa and what he would do in order to protect, I guess in a sense, protect hip-hop and keep it very communal. They also talk about the groups that were more community-based groups, like the Cold Crush brothers. They talk about the legendary battle the Cold Crush brothers had with the Fantastic Five, which, if you guys have seen, there's a series on Netflix called Hip Hop Evolution, which is a fantastic series too. If you guys haven't checked that out, that's also one to check out if you're into hip-hop. But this is great too. This kind of goes into a little bit more detail with, I would say, some of the more behind-the-scenes stuffs, as well as adding much more anecdotal stuff. But it's fun. It's a fun read. I've heard this being talked about as something that's very educational. It is, in a sense, but it's also just fun. It's a fun way to tell the story of hip-hop, and a very, I guess you could say, a very not just entertaining way to retell the story of hip-hop, but a way that'll probably be more palatable to people that are younger that don't necessarily want to sit there and read about it. I mean, this is a good way to kind of jump into it. And in this book here, in the second book, it just continues on with the stuff that's established in the 80s, and by the end of it, it gets to a point where hip-hop has another turning point with a group like Run DMC, which basically brings things back around and starts to become a much more commercially successful musical industry. So this is fantastic. I love these books. I'm going to continue to read. I'm going to get the next box set, which I think has books 3 and 4, which I think goes from 1983 to 1985. But like I said, if you are a fan of hip hop, if you love especially old school hip hop, you got to pick these up. These are great. Like I said, a little big, so you're gonna have to make room on your shelf for them, but definitely worth the $30 I paid for these first two, because I think separately, and I don't know if they still do sell them separately, but they're priced separately at about $27.99 a piece, which is quite a bit for a book, and each book is about 80 plus pages. So not a whole heck of a lot, but for, to pay $30 for one book, might as well just get them both in the box set. And like I said, it also came with this added Rob Liefeld book. I haven't read this yet, but this is, I guess, talking about, how Rob Liefeld, I guess, inspired the work or something, or I guess I'm going to have to read it. I don't know, or maybe Rob Liefeld's talking about hip-hop, who knows. But these are definitely a recommend, especially if you're a fan of Ed Piskor's work. You can see where he kind of started, I guess, with this, where he really kind of put himself out there. I believe WYSIWYG actually came before this, my bad. But this is the one that kind of was the blueprint that he used for XMen Grand Design, and it works. It works for him. It's an interesting way to tell the story in these kind of summarized or compartmentalized ways, I guess you could say. I don't know how you would describe it. Maybe Ed Piskor would describe it as something differently, but it's fantastic. I love it. So again, if you're a fan of hip hop comic books, pick this one up. Totally recommend it. Hip Hop Family Tree. All right, y'all. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any recommendations, as usual, leave them in the comment section below. And until next time, the hunt continues. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a like, share, and comment below.